When you picture the ultimate showdown between modern science and the supernatural, you might imagine like some dusty academic debate hall.
Right, yeah.
But it actually plays out every single day in sterile hospital waiting rooms. You have a doctor holding a clipboard with an MRI scan showing something that medical science basically calls incurable. And sitting right across from that grim diagnosis, you have a pair of tightly folded hands in prayer.
Yeah, it really is the exact moment where empirical evidence just sort of crashes into absolute unwavering human belief.
And there is this statistic from our sources today that it completely stopped me in my tracks. If you ask scientists or, philosophers about faith healing, virtually all of them dismiss it outright as pseudoscience.
Oh, absolutely.
You'd think that's the end of the conversation. But a Newsweek poll found that 72% of Americans believe that praying to God can cure someone. 72%. And that is even if medical science explicitly says the disease is incurable.
Yeah, I mean, the gap between the scientific consensus and public belief is staggering. It's massive. And that disconnect is really what we are diving into today.
Right.
We are taking our stack of sources, historical texts, medical reviews, legal documents, theological doctrines, and we are going to trace this collision. We're going from ancient Greek dream temples right up to modern courtrooms where parents are actually facing manslaughter charges for, praying instead of dialing 911.
I want you, the listener, to just put yourself in that waiting room for a second. Just imagine navigating a situation where you have to choose between a highly trained doctor's diagnosis and this absolute, deeply ingrained belief that a miraculous cure is, waiting for you. It's incredibly heavy.
It really is.
And this instinct to look past the physical world for a cure, it isn't just some modern phenomenon, is it?
Oh, not at all. No, the human instinct to appeal to a higher power for healing is basically as old as civilization itself.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at the ancient Greeks, they built these sprawling temple complexes dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and patients would undergo these purifying rituals and then sleep in the temple, just waiting for the god to visit them in a dream to prescribe a treatment.
That's wild.
And for mental illness, which they assumed was like a curse or a punishment sent by the gods, they would make desperate appeals to deities like Dionysus, hoping to appease them in exchange for a cure.
So the foundation is ancient, but I found myself really surprised by how modern Christian traditions handle this today. They are definitely not all operating from the same playbook.
No, they are not.
When you look at Catholicism, for instance, they seem to walk this very fine line between two worlds.
Yeah, they hold what is essentially a dual belief system. The Catholic Church officially teaches that utilizing natural medicine is a, quote, cardinal virtue of prudence.
Meaning you were supposed to go to the doctor.
Exactly. You go to the doctor. But they also maintain a steadfast belief in divine grace. The really interesting part is how bureaucratic their approach to miracles actually is. They don't just accept every claim of a healing at face value.
Right. I was reading through their actual guidelines and the sources, and it is a surprisingly rigorous process.
It involves medical boards and strict criteria. Take the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes in France, for example.
Okay.
Since 1858, millions of people have traveled there seeking cures. Out of all those visitors, the official Catholic Medical Bureau has only recognized 67 cases as certified miracles.
Wow, just 67 out of millions.
Right. Alongside about 7,000 cures they classify as medically unexplainable, but not officially miracles.
But then, you cross over into the evangelical and Pentecostal movements, and the atmosphere changes completely. The history there traces back to the early 20th century, like the 1906 Azusa Street revival in Los Angeles.
Yes, exactly.
And then you get post-World War II figures like William Branham, who our sources say is widely considered the father of modern faith healers. In these traditions, healing isn't treated as this incredibly rare, heavily vetted exception. It's seen as a direct inheritance of Jesus's redemption, something you actively seek out during massive worship services through the laying on of hands.
Yeah, it's a totally different vibe. And then you have Christian Science, which approaches illness from a completely different philosophical angle. They don't even consider themselves faith healers.
Wait, really? How does that work? If you are praying for a disease to go away, how is that not faith healing?
Well, because in Christian Science, the fundamental doctrine is that the material world, which includes disease and physical decay, isn't the true spiritual reality.
Okay, I'm with you.
So when a Christian Scientist prays, they aren't asking God to swoop down and fix a broken bone or eradicate a tumor. The practice is about adjusting what they call the human picture to match the divine reality of perfect health.
So, mechanically speaking, what does that actually look like for a patient? Are they just, actively denying their physical symptoms?
Essentially, yes, it is a profound mental and spiritual discipline where the believer works to realize that the illness is an illusion. You're trying to bring your human experience into alignment with a spiritual reality where disease simply doesn't exist.
That is fascinating, but it also sounds, incredibly difficult to maintain when you are in physical pain.
Oh, absolutely.
It's such a stark contrast to the LDS Church, the Mormons. Their doctrine also includes a strong tradition of priesthood blessings and the laying on of hands, but they heavily advocate for seeking modern medical intervention at the exact same time.
Right, and Brigham Young, one of the early leaders, actually gave a very grounded explanation for this. He used an agricultural analogy.
I loved this part of the reading.
Yeah, he essentially said, I might as well ask the Lord to cause my wheat and corn to grow without my plowing the ground and casting in the seed.
It's like a student studying for a massive exam. You don't just sit on your couch, stare at a blank wall, and pray for an A.
Right, you'd fail.
Exactly. You have to open the textbook, do the flashcards, put in the physical labor, and then you can pray for the clarity to remember it all. For the LDS Church, you go to the doctor, take the antibiotics, and pray for God to sanctify that medical application.
And, when you look across all these distinct traditions, the Catholics, the Pentecostals, the Christian Scientists, the Mormons, there's a universal thread.
Yeah.
Illness strips away human agency. It makes us acutely aware of our mortality.
Yeah, you feel totally out of control.
Exactly. Faith healing, in whatever framework it takes, is an attempt to seek control, or at least profound meaning, during a time of intense physical vulnerability. And mainstream believers are often aware of the psychological trap here. Like Larry Kefauver, a Christian writer who firmly believes in healing, he actively warns people against doing mental gymnastics to hold on to a miracle. He points out that healing might not happen in this lifetime, and forcing a positive narrative can just lead to deeper despair.
So since we just established how deeply personal and varied these theological frameworks are, what happens when these spiritual claims step out of the church and run straight into empirical science? Because science doesn't really deal in eternity or, spiritual realities.
No, it doesn't. Science deals in the measurable physical world. And when you put faith healing under a clinical microscope, the biological plausibility just collapses. Our sources highlight a major Cochrane review on this exact topic.
Just to clarify for anyone who might not know, a Cochrane review isn't just a single study, right? It's basically the gold standard in medicine where they aggregate and analyze massive amounts of clinical trial data.
Correct. It is a highly rigorous, systematic synthesis of available research. And this specific review looked at intercessory prayer, so groups of people praying for the health of patients who were ill.
And what did they find?
They found absolutely no convincing evidence that the prayer had any clinical effect. In fact, the lack of evidence was so profound that the researchers concluded further clinical trials on intercessory prayer aren't even justified. The recommendation was literally to, spend medical resources elsewhere.
Oh, wait, let me stop you there. People do get better.
Sure.
You hear the testimonies. Someone goes to a healing revival or visits a shrine and they walk away claiming their chronic pain is gone or their condition improved. How does the scientific community explain that without just calling the patient a liar?
Well, scientists and skeptics point to two primary mechanisms that don't require any supernatural intervention. The first is a logical fallacy called post hoc ergo propter hoc, which translates to after this, therefore because of this.
Okay, I think I remember this from philosophy class.
Yeah, it's the assumption that because a patient improved after a faith healer prayed for them, the prayer caused the improvement. But, diseases have natural progressions. Spontaneous remission is a documented medical reality. A patient's immune system might have simply fought off the infection on its own, regardless of the prayer.
Right. And the second explanation is the placebo effect. Right. But I think people misunderstand what a placebo actually does. It's not just, in your head.
No, it is incredibly powerful biology. When a person profoundly believes they are receiving a cure, especially in a highly charged emotional environment like a religious revival, their brain can release a surge of endorphins and dopamine.
Oh, right.
These are natural painkillers and mood elevators.
So if a placebo makes someone's chronic pain temporarily fade away because of that endorphin rush, isn't that a win? Why does the scientific community need to crash the party if the patient is experiencing genuine comfort?
The issue is the biological limit of that comfort.
Yeah.
The endorphins mask the pain, but they do not cure the underlying pathology. A tumor is still growing, and infection is still spreading.
Wow, that's dark.
Yeah, and the philosopher Etienne Vermeersch highlighted this exact limitation when he coined the Lourdes effect. He pointed out that claimed miraculous cures are always inherently ambiguous things happening inside the body that are hard to verify, like a shrinking mass or fading nerve pain. But there are 0 documented events of a severed arm being magically reattached through faith healing.
That brings up a fascinating observation from one of our sources. The scholar John Dominic Crossan visited both the Christian shrine of Lourdes and the ancient ruins of the pagan temples of Asclepius in Greece.
Yes, this was such a striking comparison.
Right, and he found this chilling visual similarity spanning thousands of years. At both shrines, hanging on the walls, you see discarded crutches. They stand as a testament to people who arrived with mobility issues and supposedly walked away healed, but you never, ever find a prosthetic limb hanging on those walls.
That perfectly illustrates the boundary. The placebo effect can alleviate the perception of pain, but it cannot transcend physics or biology. It cannot generate new bone, muscle, and tissue to replace a missing leg. It operates strictly within the confines of the body's natural abilities.
So, if faith healing only works within those natural biological limits, what happens when a charismatic healer stands on a stage and promises a grieving parent that they can transcend biology? We're crossing a major line here.
We really are.
We aren't talking about the psychological comfort of a placebo anymore. We are moving into deliberate deception.
We are moving into the grift when you have desperate, highly vulnerable people who are willing to give anything for a cure. You inevitably attract predators.
Yeah.
Our sources refer to this as the miracles for sale phenomenon. The illusionist Darren Brown actually demonstrated the mechanics of this on television.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah, he took a completely ordinary secular scuba instructor from the UK, brought him to Texas, and successfully trained him to perform as a faith healer for a real congregation.
How do you even train someone to fake a miracle?
By using the exact same techniques stage magicians use. Brown taught him how to read body language, how to use hypnotic vocal pacing, and how to utilize dramatic music and lighting to trigger that massive adrenaline and endorphin rush in the audience.
That is wild.
Right. People were falling over and claiming their pain was gone, entirely manufactured through psychological manipulation and showmanship.
And real-world investigators have caught massive televangelists doing this too. The famous skeptic James Randi targeted Peter Popoff back in the 1980s. Popoff would stand in front of thousands of people and seemingly receive divine revelations. He would call out a random audience member's name, their specific illness, their home address. It looked undeniably miraculous.
Until James Randi brought a radio scanner to the auditorium, Popoff wasn't receiving messages from God. He was wearing a hidden earpiece.
Unbelievable.
His wife was backstage, physically reading from prayer request cards the audience had filled out before the show, and she was transmitting the details directly into Popoff's ear via a radio frequency.
It is a predatory magic trick where the price of admission is a sick person's hope and their money. But sometimes the cost is so much higher than a stolen donation. The sources detail the 1955 case of Jack Coe, a massive tent revivalist in Miami.
Yes, this case is tragic.
Coe told the parents of a 3-year-old boy that God had completely healed their son of polio. He instructed them to immediately remove the boy's leg braces.
Which they did, fully believing the miracle.
Yeah.
But the biology of the disease hadn't changed. Removing the braces just left a 3-year-old in constant, agonizing pain. Coe was arrested for practicing medicine without a license, though the case was dismissed because of religious exemptions in Florida law at the time.
That's awful.
And in a dark twist of irony, Jack Coe died just a few months later from bulbar polio. It's a severe form of the virus that attacks the brainstem and destroys the ability to breathe and swallow.
It's just a horrific story, and you might assume that it's only like secular scientists and skeptics who get outraged by these stage healers, but our sources point out that the theological pushback is incredibly fierce. Mainstream theologians are often their harshest critics.
Yes, because they view it as a gross abuse of faith. There is a theological doctrine called cessationism, which argues that miraculous gifts, like instant physical healing, actually passed out of the church after the era of the original apostles. To a cessationist, these modern stage displays aren't just fake, they are entirely unbiblical.
Catholic apologists also push back hard using scripture. They cite the Book of Sirach, which explicitly commands believers to, quote, give the physician his place, for the Lord created him. They argue that fraudulent healers turn God into a cosmic vending machine. Put in your faith or your cash, and a miracle pops out.
But, as manipulative as stage fraud is, the tone of our sources takes a very dark turn when we look at the broader public health data. The greatest tragedy doesn't always involve a con artist. The most devastating consequences occur when genuine, well-meaning believers, parents who deeply love their children, substitute faith for medicine entirely.
The numbers from the American Cancer Society are really grim. They report that choosing faith healing over modern medical care measurably reduces adult life expectancy. But the data on children is what really haunts you. They cited a review estimating that over a 30-year span, more than 200 children died in the United States from completely treatable illnesses because their parents relied exclusively on spiritual healing.
And it impacts adults with chronic manageable conditions, too. The sources document cases where at least 6 people died after the church leadership convinced them they had been entirely healed of HIV by faith alone.
Oh my God.
They were instructed to throw away their antiviral medications.
Ooh.
But when you discard life-saving medicine based on belief, the biological reality of the virus just continues its progression unhindered.
So how does the legal system handle this? Because, if a parent starves their child to death, it's murder. But what happens if a parent deprives their child of life-saving insulin while holding a religious text? In the United States, this leads us to the 1974 Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, known as CAPTA.
The history of CAPTA is a stunning piece of legislative maneuvering. When the federal government originally passed this law to combat child abuse, they actually included a mandate. To receive federal funding for child protection, states were required to enact religious exemptions to their child neglect laws.
Wait, I really need to pause on this. You're telling me that the federal government actively incentivized states to create legal loopholes for medical neglect as long as the neglect was based on a religious belief.
Exactly. In an attempt to protect First Amendment religious freedoms, lawmakers created a catastrophic blind spot for child welfare. And the legacy of that decision is still with us. Even though the federal mandate was eventually removed, 31 states still have religious exemptions for child abuse on the books today.
31 states.
Yes, and in 6 of those states, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Louisiana, Ohio, and Virginia, those exemptions are so broad they can protect parents from charges of manslaughter and murder.
The sources detail some incredibly tragic cases that stem from these exact legal environments. In Oregon, there is a sect called the Followers of Christ Church. In 2008, a 15-month-old named Ava Worthington died. Her parents let a cystic growth develop on her neck for months. Instead of taking her to a doctor, they anointed her with oil, gave her diluted wine, and fasted.
Yeah.
She died of a blood infection and bronchial pneumonia. Her father was eventually convicted of criminal mistreatment.
But the tragedies in that specific congregation continued. The following year, a newborn named David Hickman died of staph pneumonia, a brutal infection where the lungs fill with fluid and pus. His parents watched him turn gray and struggled to breathe for hours, but they only prayed. They were later convicted of second-degree manslaughter.
It's just devastating.
And just recently, in 2023, parents in that same church pled guilty to criminal mistreatment after their 2-day-old baby died of a highly treatable condition while they anointed him with oil.
And this legal tension isn't limited to the United States. In Australia, members of a religious sect called the Saints were convicted of manslaughter in 2025. They intentionally withheld insulin from an 8-year-old girl named Elizabeth Strose for nearly a week. She died of diabetic ketoacidosis. Her body was literally starving at a cellular level, her blood turning highly acidic, while her parents and the church members sat around her, praying and singing. It raises the ultimate legal and moral paradox. How do lawmakers weigh the fundamental right to religious freedom against a child's fundamental right to simply live?
Well, the legal tide is slowly shifting to answer that question. The law generally recognizes that a competent adult has absolute bodily autonomy. If you want to refuse a blood transfusion or life-saving surgery for yourself based on your theology, the state will usually let you, even if it kills you. But minors do not have that autonomy. They are entirely captive to the decisions of their caretakers.
So society's tolerance for religious exemptions is hitting a hard limit when a child is involved.
Precisely. The increasing number of manslaughter convictions we are seeing in Oregon, Australia, and elsewhere shows that courts are drawing a new line in the sand. They are increasingly ruling that your constitutional right to freely practice your religion ends the exact moment your child's life is put in jeopardy due to medical neglect.
It is an incredibly heavy reality to process. To wrap up our deep dive today, we have traced this complex collision from the ancient dream temples of Asclepius all the way to modern televangelists broadcasting miracles through hidden earpieces. We've explored the uncompromising biological realities of empirical science and the heartbreaking legal battles that unfold when belief systems demand the ultimate sacrifice from vulnerable children. It really underscores why understanding the full scope of our sources is so crucial.
It does. And as we close, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to explore on your own. Modern medicine is advancing at an astonishing pace. Diseases that were universally viewed as fatal acts of God just a century ago are now easily curable with a simple pill or a vaccine. As that scientific march continues, will the legal and societal definition of medical neglect continue to expand? Eventually, will this undeniable medical progress force the total elimination of all religious exemptions, permanently redefining the boundaries of religious freedom in the modern world?
It's a profound question, because the next time you walk past a hospital waiting room, you might just see that exact battle playing out in real time. On one side, the MRI machine. On the other, the folded hands. It's up to us and the law to figure out who ultimately gets to decide the outcome.